Hi, welcome to Cal Periodical. I'm Cal, reporting periodically on all things music, film and culture at large. Welcome to the second episode, where we'll be looking at my favourite films of the year 2021. In the previous video, I did favourite albums of the year, and I figured seeing as it was still January, I can still conceivably be talking about 2021 for maybe the next couple of days. Unlike that last video, this is a much shorter list at just 15. It was only in the last couple of years that I really started to tune in to what films I was watching being released in the year that we were in. I've always loved films ever since I was a kid, but I guess as I grew up with an increased awareness of Oscar season and what was being nominated for awards and Sundance and all that kind of thing, I've sort of looked out more for what was happening as it came. And funnily enough, over the last couple of years, not being able to physically go to the cinema has actually made me a more voracious film watcher. Certainly in this past year, I've watched more movies from the year we've been in than I have done for a while. I do also have COVID to thank for helping me complete this list, as when I spent about a week in bed, I watched probably 2 films every day, many of which were from 2021. So I did a lot of catching up in that time, and it definitely helped me make some of the decisions that are on this list now. So before we dive into the list, I just wanted to go through a handful of honourable mentions that didn't quite make the list, but which I really enjoyed this year. Firstly, Dune, a monumental sci-fi accomplishment from my favourite director. Minari, a beautifully shot portrait of a family with a stunning score. No Time to Die, which I did get to actually really enjoy on the big screen this year. Luca, my favourite family film from Disney this year. Nobody, a fantastically violent turn from Bob Odenkirk. Palm Springs, Andy Samberg's Groundhog Day for millennials. The Guilty, Jake Gyllenhaal tackling the bottle movie with style. Lamb, a brilliantly eerie Icelandic film about a couple's struggle with grief. Judas and the Black Messiah, where Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield absolutely wowed in their biopic about Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers. And Candyman, which drew horror from gentrification and race violence. So, those films didn't quite make it. Apologies if they were definitely in your top lists.
At this point, I should probably point out that this list was compiled using 2021 UK release dates. So if you're in the States or somewhere else and you're thinking you saw this film in 2020, then yeah, sorry.
But here is my top 15 movies of 2021.
Don't Look Up by Adam McKay.
2 astronomers discover an extinction-sized comet hurtling for Earth and are disappointed to find that the world would prefer to do its own research. Many people found the climate change allegory too on the nose here, but I absolutely loved it. When you're dealing with a topic that so many people, from world leaders to the man on the street, are hell-bent on ignoring, then you kind of have to forgo subtlety to an extent. Bringing in a mammoth roster of A-list actors and artists and releasing it worldwide on Netflix right before Christmas is enough to get people to pay attention. But the fact that the film itself is actually fantastic should really be applauded. It's knowingly absurd, but no scene in it is wasted. You buy into the drama completely and follow the scientists and their despair at the ignorance on display. Truly a movie for our ages. And bonus points for Mark Rylance haunting Silicon Valley overlord Ghoul and Jonah Hill's cokehead son of the president, Sass.
The Power of the Dog by Jane Campion.
2 cattle rancher brothers are torn apart when one marries down. The other torments the new bride and her son until the lines between love and hate are blurred completely. In what could be the performance of his career, Benedict Cumberbatch entirely becomes the surly and intimidating cowboy sociopath. What initially starts as a modern western slowly, meticulously unravels into a gothic revenge film. It's shot so beautifully that each scene transports you deep into the emotions conveyed before yanking you out again with a tense confrontation. The score further builds the sense of anxiety as you fully understand how the torment from one man can drive a person to complete despair. A really interesting film that I didn't expect to see in 2021, just giving you enough so that you're left pondering it long after it ends.
I Care a Lot by Jay Blakeson.
A court-appointed guardian who cons the elderly bites off more than she can chew when she preys on the mother of a gangster. Rosamund Pike dazzles as a real-life, modern-day supervillain, shining a light on the callous treatment of the elderly in Western culture. Part black comedy, part action thriller, it was quite unlike anything I'd seen for some time. Peter Dinklage and his mother, Diane Weist, both deliver absolutely stellar performances that keep you totally gripped throughout. His final moments took my breath away, and I was thinking about the film for a long time after it ended.
Surge by Anil Currier.
An airport security clerk suffers a psychotic break as he pinballs across central London. Ben Whishaw has long been one of my favourite actors, and it was a real thrill to see him doing this kind of role. The debut feature-length from director Anil Currier, who recently worked with Riz Ahmed on the stunning short The Long Goodbye. Interestingly, the press release for the film describes his character's plot as a bold and reckless journey of self-liberation, which to me feels completely misleading. Utilising fantastic handheld camera work, you feel as though you're constantly running after the protagonist, just willing him not to hurt himself or anyone else. It made me grit my teeth with stress for the whole runtime, much like the works of the Safdie brothers does too. I felt exhausted by the end of it, but completely blown away.
Encounter by Michael Pearce.
An ex-Marine rescues his 2 sons from an unknown danger and embarks on a journey across the States. I watched this one on Amazon Prime purely from seeing Riz Ahmed in the thumbnail, but boy am I glad that I did. I won't say too much about it because the beauty of the film is in its deception, so I implore you to check it out without even watching the trailer if you can. Just know that it does precisely what I crave from the best of psychological thrillers, in that it constantly makes you question your own understanding of the information being shown to you. Riz is of course stupendous, as are the 2 young actors who play his sons. This one's a real hidden gem.
The Green Knight by David Lowery.
Based entirely on a 14th century Arthurian poem, Dev Patel sets off on a medieval supernatural adventure to prove his manhood. Having seen and loved Lowery's 2017 A Ghost Story, I was intrigued to see what he would do with the source material here. The Green Knight is an eerie and haunting experience, unlike any period piece like it. The whole thing feels like one long dream sequence, so completely surreal and untethered, you're never sure what's real and what's not. Those going into this expecting a straight reading of the Knights of the Round Table folklore will be completely wrong-footed. Patel is fantastic, and his very human performance is what ties the whole thing together.
The Father by Florian Zeller.
A patriarch in the twilight years of his life struggles with change as his mind completely turns on him. Before seeing this, I had the father pegged as Oscar's fodder, but the way it's done, from the set design to the script and of course the performances, shows that the fuss really is justified. Fortunately, I've never had to experience firsthand the torment of a loved one going through the mental decline of Alzheimer's, but the film demonstrates it with a real artistry. From the subtleties of the shifting furniture to the Gondry-esque snaps from one place to another, the most striking thing about The Father is that it places the audience in exactly the same space as Hopkins' character. Your confusion is his and vice versa. A real success in imposed empathy.
Nomadland by Chloe Zhao.
A widower loses everything after the Great Recession and decides to embark on a life on the road, travelling across America in a camper van. I think Frances McDormand is becoming one of my absolute favourite actors. After 3 billboards a few years back and now this, her later career is something to behold. Nomadland is a gorgeous character study of the modern nomadic community in America. People who have largely chosen to live life on the road after the grind of scraping by to make house payments became impossible. It's done with such a sweet sensitivity that you fall in love with every random person encountered along the way. In some ways it reminded me of how I felt after first watching Into the Wild as a teenager. That maybe a simpler, more meaningful life is out there if we can just turn our back on all the noise.
Promising Young Woman by Emerald Fennell.
Carey Mulligan's Cassie dedicates her life to extracting revenge on predatory men after the tragic passing of her best friend. I'm always one for a vengeance film, but I've never seen it done quite like this before. Truly a movie for our time. For anyone who's been remotely tuned into the conversation around toxic masculinity and rape culture, this is a hugely satisfying watch. In much the same way as we delighted in watching the bloody murders of Nazis in Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards, Promising Young Woman presents us with bad people and gives them what they deserve. Bo Burnham also makes an understated appearance as the silent bystander, forcing the men in the audience to ask themselves the tough question, is doing nothing enough?
The Card Counter by Paul Schrader.
An ex-military man leaves prison and spends his life on the casino trail. He sees the opportunity for salvation when he meets an angry young man. If the previous film on my list was a revenge movie, then this is a redemption one. Oscar Isaac perfectly captures the portrait of a man hounded by the horrors of what he did in the military, and who punishes himself with an empty life. Written and directed by the same man who wrote Taxi Driver, Card Counter is again about a lone wolf, but the chance to save someone else from a life of violence and pain has him open his circle and let people in. I didn't know anything about the film going in, but the cold cinematography creates such a heady vibe that sucks you in right from the beginning. A really captivating story executed wonderfully.
The French Dispatch by Wes Anderson.
An anthology film of 3 stories detailing the journalistic misadventures of the staff of an American expat magazine in France. I want to start by saying that, surprise surprise, Wes Anderson has been one of my favourite directors ever since I can remember watching movies. With that said, as someone who has enjoyed everything he's ever done, I believe this to be his best work in nearly 15 years. Who else can bring a cast so vast together and still create a work that feels so intimately meticulous? There's little left to say about his directorial aesthetic that hasn't been said before, but where more recent films potentially started to feel like Anderson by numbers, The French Dispatch feels rejuvenated and cooler than ever. I loved the idea of this fictional town and its quirky eccentricities and colourful characters. It's exciting to have a film come out so recently that I could recommend to anyone as an entry point to Anderson's work.
The Lost Daughter by Maggie Gyllenhaal.
A professor treats herself to a working holiday on a Greek coastline, but is unsettled by memories sparked by watching a young mother and her daughter. Maggie Gyllenhaal makes her exceptional debut with a film that ingeniously reflects back what the viewer brings to it. I heard her say in an interview that The Lost Daughter is about the idea of being an unnatural mother, and seeks to discuss out loud the taboo idea that not all women intrinsically have that maternal gene. In practice, the movie takes place partly in the present day, with the incredible Olivia Colman again, and part some 20 years in the past, where Colman's character is played by Jessie Buckley as she navigates new motherhood. Personally, I've never seen anything so fearlessly show the relentless struggle to care for young children in such an honest light before. I found it hard to watch at times because of it. Incidentally, a lot was made about another excellent Colman performance, as well as appearances from Dakota Johnson and Paul Mescal, but it was Buckley's role as the young mother, torn between her dreams and her biological responsibilities, that really stuck with me.
Sound of Metal by Darius Marder.
A recovering addict and metal drummer is dealt a crippling blow when he loses his hearing and must relearn how to do everything. Riz Ahmed is a national treasure and is easily one of our very best actors. He plays anger and frustration with a fiery passion, but simultaneously manages to show the boy inside too, afraid, confused and alone. It was so great to see a film like this get the acclaim it deserved this year. It's an incredible story of a man already struggling with demons, having his passion ripped away from him and seeing his life come apart because of it. The sound treatment throughout is so clever and really puts you in his head. I loved how it gave no easy answers, but gave so much to love. I challenge anyone to see this film and not be desperate to learn ASL afterwards.
Another Round by Thomas Vinterberg.
4 friends and teacher colleagues in a rut decide to embark on a social experiment to maintain a certain alcohol level throughout the day. This Danish film was my big surprise hit of the year, and as soon as the credits rolled, I was hell-bent on everyone I knew seeking out to watch it immediately. Mads Mikkelsen delivers a career-high performance as an endlessly relatable middle-aged man who has let himself become uninspired, demotivated and vacant. The premise of staying tipsy seems simple, but interestingly, at various points in the film I found myself worrying that it glorified alcoholism, while at others I was worried that it would come off preachy about not drinking at all. Miraculously, it does neither, and the lessons learned are all about love, brotherhood, and imbuing meaning into your life, no matter how far you've come. It's something really special.
Come On by Mike Mills.
A radio journalist travelling the country interviewing children has a steep learning curve when he suddenly has to look after his 9-year-old nephew. Joaquin Phoenix is definitely one of my favourite actors, but after the divisive Joker, it was great to see him in something gentle and artistic again. I'm a father, and someone who's always loved children and wanting to have my own ever since I was one myself. But the beauty about Come On is that it's not necessarily a film about parenting, but more about seeing the world through the eyes of a child. The bonds formed in this film are eccentric, complicated, but binding and fierce. Everything about the way you experience the movie adds to its artistic brilliance. The black and white, the repeated use of clair de lune, the interludes of intertextuality. It's impossible to deny what a work of art this is. But at the same time, it does all this without being showy or pretentious in the least bit. One of those beautiful stories where nothing particularly momentous takes place, much like real life, but you come away from it changed, softened somehow. And that's why it was my favourite movie of 2021. Lastly, as something of a bonus round, I just wanted to make special mention of Bo Burnham's Inside. I didn't include it on my list because it's not a feature-length film. Is it a comedy special? Is it a musical? Performance art? I'm not sure. But truth be told, it was probably the best thing that I saw this year. I'm fully aware I am the stereotype of someone who would love this. A child of the early 90s who has grown uncomfortable with the growing reliance on technology and the constant pursuit of validation through content. But it really did feel like a moment this year, not just because it was released while we too were inside. With it, Burnham cemented himself as one of the greats of our time, akin to the likes of Andy Kaufman. You don't know if you should clap or call for help. I've watched this and made others watch this more times than anything else in 2021, and no doubt I will again. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to let 2021 lie now and start looking ahead again by producing some more regular and shorter videos in the hopes to kind of get things moving a bit. So if you are enjoying what you're seeing so far, please consider subscribing or telling a friend, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks again.